Welcome to Newsroom, brought to you by Insurance Brokers Alliance. This is, of course, where we give you our opinion on what's going on in the news around the country and indeed around the world from the perspective of our very own panel tonight, Carolyn Dean.
Hello, Val.
Nice to have you back.
Thank you.
And Tom Conroy.
I feel exposed.
You feel...
I haven't done all the research. Look at this. This is very impressive.
Give him a piece of paper. He feels a lot at that stage.
I feel like
you feel settled there, Tom?
I need that one.
You need that one. Just when you've got a spare piece of paper later on.
Something you probably don't
Good
need
evening,
to,
Bill.
yes, hello, Tom. Something you probably don't need to do any research about was today's news. Front page Southland Times, Tony Major, local engineer, has basically been expelled from IPENS, which is the Institute of Professional Engineers. Did you see this coming?
Well, someone signs off on the drawing, don't they?
Yes.
And it's his name on it, the design, and somebody will fall by the wayside when such a tragic event happens of the collapsing of the stadium. So no surprises that someone was going to be the fall guy. Whether he's the only person responsible, you're never quite sure. I'm sure there is a number of factors, a number of people involved, and they're yet to be exposed. But you start at the top, the person who, as I say, says it's okay, it's safe, and it wasn't. And that's where I think that responsibility lies. It's unfortunate that he's on a sort of out on a limb at the moment. But I think as investigations go on, we hope that anyone else that had a party to that unfortunate incident is also accountable.
Yes.
So I say, as a surprise, no. And I think, given what's happened in Christchurch and all those engineers being questioned, that any time there is a collapse of that nature, somebody's going to be treated equally the same, and that's put on trial effectively and judged by their peers as not suitable for the body anymore.
And we do need standards, don't we? I mean, particularly as someone from the Institute pointed out, I think it might have been the chair of the Institute, chief executive, that had that been a Southern Steel game, the results would have been horrific.
Absolutely. The timing was, if there can be any timing for such an incident,
yes.
Perfect.
Yes.
So few people exposed and they were all safe at the end of it. But there could have been a concert there with 2,000-3,000 people or one of the boxing extravaganzas. Who knows what could have been. But there's no point in doing if that's not the case. And then you have to judge it purely as an engineering incident.
Right.
Was it correctly spec'd? Was it correctly repaired? Because we had that remedial work done. And then is he responsible for all of that? Well, to start with, yes, but it would be good to see how the investigation then rolls out to see what other parties were involved, because he didn't hammer every nail in, didn't do the bolts, but he did tick it off to say it was okay.
It seems like he took some people at their word that the work was done, and therein lies the lesson perhaps to a lot of us, that when you're signing off something like that where there is a huge amount at stake, a lot of responsibility, probably pays to check it yourself.
You have to delegate though, don't you, to a certain degree. If
you
it's a massive job, can you be an expert on every aspect of the building? Perhaps not. You defer to other people, they let you down. They're also accountable.
Yeah.
So judging from the report by the Department of Building and Housing, which was the first report to come out,
yes indeed.
They, from memory, essentially said the initial design was good, was fine. There was a mistake made in some computing of the original design, and that's why the original trusses sagged.
Okay.
Then they had this remedial work done to them, and the design of that should have been fine. So the way that it was designed was
so far so
up
good
to spec, or it should have been all good. So there shouldn't have been an issue. The problem was with workmanship. So what we're talking about is the guy on the ladder doing the welding and those, that sort of detailed workmanship, it's down at that level that the failure has occurred. And what I think is interesting, reading about, because of course what's happened is that Tony's been expelled from the Institute of Engineers, but this is not an investigation by the police, it's not an investigation by the government, it's his institute saying, well, you're out. But the question that raises for me is, why did he not resign from the Institute in the same way that Dr. Alan Ray and the engineer from Canterbury TV building resigned?
That's right.
They both resigned before they were called to account. So why did Tony Major not resign to avoid this whole thing?
Perhaps he thought it was defendable and that there are other parties. I don't know what his mindset was, I'm just guessing as to why he said, well, okay, I did everything I think was right. Something's gone wrong subsequently. Yes. Why should I take all the blame? As I said,
I think that is essentially what a spokesperson is saying, is that they, he asked for it to be this way, and then something was changed, a spec was changed, and then they had to fix that, and then he was assured that what was finally done was right, but he didn't have access to check it anymore. So I think, just reading between the lines, that he felt that he was not as culpable.
There's a hint of unfairness there, isn't there?
Or is there? Because the initial miscalculation, if that was his, the remedial work required shouldn't have been required in the first place. So when you go back to the very beginning, you can say, well, yes, you were responsible for making sure that remedial work was never required in the first place because you designed it properly in the outset. So I don't think you can ever say, you're a scapegoat, the only person. I think you're certainly culpable in some regards, but I don't think solely so. One person did not build that building. A lot of people are responsible for shoddy workmanship that led to the demise.
Yes.
And whether it goes any further, I'm just second guessing that perhaps there are other investigations.
Well, there are lawsuits
exactly,
out there.
and I think that it won't be the only name that we'll hear that will be will share the blame.
Right. Yeah. Could be more coming.
And it's like any medical society. They stand down doctors that aren't conforming, don't they? And teachers.
Of course. One of the differences with teachers, if you have a big failure like that, you'll have your practising certificate removed, and there's no more teaching for you.
Can Tony Major still practice?
He can still practice.
He can still practice.
Yeah, because that's obviously not an obligation to belong to the engineering group. So,
in fact, it's what has come out of this, it seems, and the Christchurch situation too, that engineers are not that well regulated. I mean, you can't practice and be a professional engineer without a degree in engineering, obviously. Once you've got that, and I don't know about the charter, I'm just not too sure, but it seems like you can set yourself up in an engineering practice. And
it takes a major event, doesn't it, to shake the qualification for doing different jobs out of the woodwork. For instance, when there was a global financial crisis, we found out that the financial investment advisors just made it up. They didn't ever belong to anything.
Exactly.
And then we decided, we better regulate that. Well, isn't it a bit late? But it takes something like that to look back and say, okay, what are we actually qualified to do here? Because you're at the perception, aren't you, when you walk into the investment place or you work with an engineer, you just don't look at the qualifications, take them down, and
expensive name on the door, and a nice suit. That's the qualification.
A few letters after your name.
Yes,
sounds good to me.
Yes,
I think too. You really need to remember that, and working in this environment, building something like a stadium for a city, you're under a lot of pressure from a lot of different parties. You've got funders, you've got time frames, you've got income that you need to start generating from the stadium, so that you don't end up more in debt. And I think all those pressures really come into it in a way that's a lot more significant than if you were building a residential home or something like that. So
yet there's more responsibility, isn't it, because of the potential hazard.
The university's
but you're right, pressures and it rushes decisions, and not always the best. And of course, most times it works out, but when it doesn't, then you start to look back. Maybe we just needed to stand back a little bit and be more cautious.
I mean, they're quite scathing, and the other question that it raises is how was Tony Major engaged? Because IPN seemed to be saying he's not competent to, like, a skill set was not competent really to that level.
They did say that,
They're saying that in retrospect, or because they thought in the outset he wasn't qualified?
I think the whole way along the way, they're saying that the skill set was not, it wasn't up to the level of competency.
Right. Required for such a project.
Exactly, and also they sort of referred to a casual attitude.
They did. Yes.
It's pretty,
It is pretty scathing, as you said. Yes,
and you're being judged by your peers, aren't you?
Yes, that's right. Yeah, the committee said his competencies had not improved and remained below the expected standards. Yeah, and it is. It is quite a hard report, really.
But even a blind man's got the benefit of hindsight, so you can be as condemning as you like. Now, why weren't they saying, as soon as this name came up on this project, hang on a minute, we don't think this person's quite right, and step forward then, do they? And say, look to the council, say, look, I know you've appointed this guy, but we're just a little bit uncomfortable that he may need some support or things. It's all right sitting back later when it's all gone wrong and say, you shouldn't have given him the job in the first place. Well, what's that regulatory body for if it's not to point out the weaknesses before it happens?
Yeah, and as you said, Tom, I think the big thing which has happened from the earthquakes, from this and from everything else, is that there will be a different focus now, in saying how do we regulate engineers, or how do they prove their competency, or whatever it is as time goes by. In fact, the universities, they offer a Masters in Engineering Management too, which probably helps engineers to cope with things like people saying, we'll do it cheaper. And because that is obviously a significant pressure. Nobody wants to pay a lot of money, say, well, that's over-designed, I don't want to pay for that. Or we want it just enough to meet the regulations. Well, that's always tricky. So,
and I think back in the day there was such a thing as a clerk. I can't remember the full title, but it's like a clerk of the site who basically would oversee.
Called them clerk of works.
Right.
Yeah.
So all that they would oversee all those, make sure all the boxes were ticked, and they would have that overarching detail focus. And I don't think that's there anymore. And the other thing I think is sometimes lacking in these projects as a project manager. I know it sort of sounds like it's intuitive that you would have a project manager, but actually you don't necessarily. It can just be the architect that's running the show, and it's not the same thing. I don't think it gives you the same level of coordination and skill set.
So a lot of things that could be looked into there.
Well, yeah, and I think the engineering sector as a whole is being quite well scrutinised now, because you're getting quite variances in what's a building meets spec and what isn't. You can go to several engineers and get different levels of.
We saw that out of Christchurch, didn't we?
Well, that's right. This engineer might be saying it's 20% safe. This one 40% safe. So which one do you believe?
Of course, very difficult when the building's in place and you've got no plans for it.
But who else? On who else can you rely?
Yeah.
Do you rely on your first quote? Do you get three? Take the average. How do you set the standard? And I think they're even finding their way about how to regulate the buildings and how to sort of assess the buildings and come up with some uniformity about what qualifies and in a hurry, because there was so much work to do.
Yeah. Very interesting. Tom, you were going to the floods up north. We know there's financial assistance being offered by the government, and probably they certainly do need some assistance up there. The rain and whatnot, there's been huge losses on agriculturally and things like that. It seems to be focused quite a lot on agriculture, this kind of assistance, though, doesn't it?
Well, it's an oddity. I was just thinking the other day, and I don't think I've reached a conclusion just yet. It's very specific to this industry, as you say, to agriculture, is that when there's a drought, there's assistance, and when there's flood, there's assistance, and that's all great. It's a very important part of our economy. And when there's, in between, you've got good fertile conditions for farming. But when you buy a farm, you buy industry hazards, don't you? You know,
it is a business.
You're fickle to your weather.
It's a business.
You're fickle to the international exchange rate and what the solid costs are. But you know that when you buy the business. When things don't go right, in comes this assistance. And okay, it's an important industry, no question about that. But I'm just trying to find, is there an equivalent in other industries? For instance, if nobody advertises with me or the sponsors pull out, can I go to someone and say, can you give me some assistance until the sponsors come back? Okay, I'm not as a critical industry, I'm not even claiming to be, but...
You're not a primary industry,
No, I'm
you?
not, but tourism, okay, we'll take tourism,
okay.
and that is a primary industry, I'd call that primary, wouldn't you? Because it's such a huge income earner for it. We'll say it doesn't snow at Remarkables. To the ski field operators, can they go to the government and say, can you tide us over until such time as it snows? So I'm just saying what other industries can benefit from this support. I'm not saying the farmers shouldn't have it for 1 second, because it's very important, but I'm saying what other industries,
our key industries,
can also say, look, okay, can you help us through a difficult time?
Right.
And I was just curious. I mean, if a school closes, for instance, because the pupils get down to 20, okay, and the government decides to close, and the teacher loses the job, they don't say, oh, can you just tide us over till the more kids turn up at school, do they? They just close the school, move on to the next one. And don't tell me that's not a very important industry, it's an extremely one. So I'm just saying, is how are those decisions made, I'm not sure where I am with it. It just crossed my mind as thinking, who else could benefit from such a scheme of that immediate support, which obviously they needed at the time.
Yeah, maybe there needs to be something in place which is just not focused on agriculture, but...
there may be, I'm just not aware of it, that's all. And I was just thinking, it's nice that they've got that support, and obviously it's needed because it was an extreme situation. But other industries, I'm sure, should prosper from the same sort of assistance in difficult times. Yeah.
You got a view on that one, Carol?
I'm racking my brain to think, is there what happened with Tiwai?
Yeah, that sprung to my mind too.
Okay, that's
$30 million.
That's a one-off one rather than industry specific, wasn't it? It was a
coal mining.
Yeah, they. Yeah.
What happened there? I think,
Yeah,
the problem was the government owned the company.
Yeah, I think that wasn't quite an assistance one. They actually
Yes.
the owners of it.
Yes,
But
yes.
Would it airlines? I suppose they supported the Air New Zealand when they were in trouble, didn't they?
They do.
So it could happen.
It's probably a scope thing, as opposed to whether it's agriculture or what industry it is. If the scope of the industry is such that for it to be struggling is going to impact the country, then of course that's what the government's going to do. And maybe it just is that agriculture has the scope, it is big enough, it is primary industry, and it has quite a few struggles. And so those factors put together mean that it does get...
Has good times too, though.
Yeah.
Good times too for, putting things away for rainy days, and it rained.
Yeah.
It
did, so
it kept on raining.
I'm certainly not against the system. I mean, they're absolutely clear, but I'm just thinking, how far widespread is that? But you pick out a couple of good points. A couple of good points where specific examples.
Veering slightly off that, I was interested to read recently that in Southland, of course, we're used to a bit of rain and the odd breeze down here, that after the big floods of 1984, there were a lot of earthworks done around the city, protecting the city and things like that. Yeah. And since then, we have had equivalent rain, and it hasn't even made the news that the flood protection has worked so well. So that has been a very good investment.
Yeah,
the government paid for some of that.
Was it a government or was it a council?
It was a bit of both. Bit of both, I think. Yeah.
I don't know if it was the government.
I was trying to give them a bit of credit. Don't think I should.
I don't think so, because my recollection is that after that,
Are you old enough to remember that?
No, but my recollection of somebody telling me this
right.
not that long ago was that it was council that rated for it.
Okay.
But there could have been a grant or something from government.
There might have been a 1-for-1 or something, I think, on river protection.
Possibly.
Well, it all worked. It all worked
At the end of the day, that's
extremely well.
Great investment.
It was a very good investment indeed. And another investment that you're quite keen on Southland getting into is different kind of horticulture or agriculture? The growing of hemp.
It was just a discussion to have. I didn't necessarily say that I was
you're
keen on getting into it. I don't
right.
want to quite stick my neck out that far. But I thought it was a really interesting submission made to Venture Southland, that hemp would be a potentially good crop for Southland.
Yep.
Because you can do so many things with it. It's a very strong fibre.
Incredibly vigorous plant. Yeah.
The strongest fibre. You can do quite a lot with the seeds. The oil actually is equivalent to fish oil, so it means you could take the pressure off the fisheries, and plus it's local. It's not fish oil. You're not necessarily sure where it's coming from or what environment that's been in. So it's got a lot of benefits, and hemp can be grown in marginal land that animals can't graze.
Right.
So it's making a lot.
How does it grow? How do you grow it? Is it a
That's
tree or a plant? I don't know.
It's
a
related
plant.
to
A plant, like a flaxseed type thing?
a bit like a tomato. Well, it's closely related to cannabis, and so it grows about the same height as those plants that we see on the news every now and again, but without the same concentration of the compounds which are undesirable in society.
It looks exactly like marijuana,
Yeah, it does.
none of us have
Scarily
ever,
about.
we've never seen.
Nope.
But it's
Certainly not me.
marijuana is 3 to 22% THC, and hemp is 0.3.
So 1/10 the
So
amount.
way under at the bottom end of the scale. So
But presumably you harvest this in a controlled environment, and it's only for this specific purpose.
So what the interesting things are that it's basically, you can't really do this in the States. You can do it in Colorado, but it's not really allowed in the States. But in New Zealand 12 years ago, we decided to allow it with a licence.
Right.
So with a $550 licence, you can grow it, and then you just have to be monitored frequently that your crop has not gone higher than 0.3 of THC. If you go higher than that, then you're getting into trouble. So obviously Venture Southland, this is the sort of thing they've researched in the past, these diversifying crops, and they've looked at it before, and actually they said it's viable in South. It would need more research, but it's something that will be viable to grow. So I like the idea of the innovation and
We're always interested in things which are going to grow well in Southland, from which we can make a bit of extra money. So on that happy note, we're going to take a break. Stay with us. We'll be back very shortly. Welcome back to Newsroom. Well, I don't know whether you've been watching the Soccer World Cup or not. A lot of very excited viewers, particularly with that final. And overall, big win for Germany, Tom.
Well, it was a big win for Germany.
And a big surprise for some Brazilians, and we really thought there was going to be just the competition there was going to be, well, I suppose it was pretty even, wasn't it? But
it was very good. I mean, Brazil have been maligned because they performed poorly in the knockout stages, but they still got there ahead of 28 other people, countries.
And in the end, it was only by one goal, wasn't it?
Oh, but no, they just played awful in those last couple of games. But Germany only won by one goal. But I think, looking at the Cup as a whole, I think it was a huge success for a country that was being ridiculed for not being ready. We heard, the stadium's not ready, this is not ready, they can't possibly hold the World Cup, they're disorganised, they haven't got their act together. And now they're saying they held the best World Cup ever. And in terms of both spectacle, the football was very good, and I think I think the crowds play a big part of that. They make it a lot of fun. They apparently did stage some wonderful things outside of the stadiums for people who couldn't get in. They could go to the beach and watch it on big screens and
perhaps they
enjoy themselves.
The rest of the world just didn't understand the Brazilian way of doing things.
I think so, and we hear it every time that no one's ever ready for the Olympics. No one's ever, apart from the Chinese, nobody's ever ready for the World Cup. But somehow it still happens, and
it's still part of the excitement, isn't it, Tom?
I think it's a build up the years, the hype and everything. But I mean, Brazil got the Olympics coming up. So I think it's dispelled any fear that they can't do that, because they've held something almost as big. And
there has been a call from inside the country to say, hey, why are you spending this amount of money on these massive stadiums on sport when we've got thousands, millions of poor people who haven't got a job?
But imagine how many people spent money over there in the television rights, and there would have been income generated from that investment. And I think it was a great advert for Brazil. It's not a country that everyone thinks about going to visit, but I think they might think about it now.
And a very big country. I mean, what's the population? 100 million people? Was it more?
More than that, I would think. Yeah, I would guess twice that number. But certainly, South America doesn't seem to be on people's radar often for visiting, but I think they saw the fun that could be had, and that there's a lot of talk about the dangers. Well, we had one or two incidents about muggings and that, but you could get mugged in Auckland or Invercargill for that matter. When you're given the exposure,
arguably any kind of football, we'll call it from a British point of view, would be dangerous if you go to the wrong part of the stand in Britain.
But when was the last time anyone got mugged in Invercargill?
Oh, I can't recall, but I'm sure somebody did.
Don't tell the
the viewing
audience.
No city is 100%
safe.
No, but every city has some criminal elements, so we can't hide that we're exceptional. But with the World Cup too, the other fuss was that when they got eliminated, there'd be riots and all that sort of thing. They behaved, I thought, impeccably. I mean, they took it on the chin.
Actually,
they were beaten 7-1.
Better than we would have expected from a lot of European countries, quite frankly.
Correct.
What would have happened if that had happened in Britain?
And the first incident that occurred, and it was a European, there was a death, a sad death. It was somebody larking about on a fountain in Belgium or Netherlands or somewhere, watching it on TV and fell over, and it wasn't actually in Brazil at all. So I think they did a fabulous job under a high degree of scrutiny and with a massive audience, put on a fantastic tournament, and the players made it good. Because
now tell us something about you're probably in a good position to tell us this. FIFA, of course, controls these events.
Yep.
Do the countries actually get any money by selling the television rights, or does FIFA get it?
I wouldn't like to hazard a guess.
You don't know, right? Okay.
Whose fingers are in the pies from the day they get awarded the World Cup to actual payouts. You wouldn't have a clue what goes on.
So where is the money made from an event like this?
The television rights were huge, massive television rights. Because it's after the Olympics. In fact, in some regards, it probably demands the same sort of numbers. Every country in the world takes coverage,
bigger audience,
and they all have to pay for it. Yeah. There's a massive amount of money involved.
Well, we must be talking billions.
Billions and billions. It would be tens of billions of dollars.
Right.
So how that's divvied up is getting to the last person who sold tickets. I don't know about that, but So, and I wouldn't trust FIFA really as far as I could throw them.
No.
However, the end result is people will just remember a great football tournament and move on to the next one.
So where does it go next time?
Russia, and then controversially to Qatar, which is under scrutiny, but they'll still end up holding it because there's some suggestion that
there's always an
money
argument.
changed hands in the decision-making process. Fancy that.
Far be it from us to suggest that.
So cynical.
Did you watch?
No.
Did you watch any minute of the football at all?
I didn't see 1 second of the football. What is that?
What shape? Here's a quiz for you, Carolyn. What shape ball do they use?
I didn't see any of it, but I keep meaning to. But I
that's good.
But I keep getting distracted by the E channel.
The E channel,
yeah,
right.
reality TV, the Kardashians, that sort of thing. I just keep.
That's the priorities.
Look what's coming.
We won't make any sexist comments at
No,
all.
we won't.
Not
We
on this
won't at
show.
all.
I know that Tom really rates reality TV, and this is why.
Oh yeah, very highly.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah. Just absolutely.
This is why I bring it up.
It's the biggest contradiction ever. There's nothing real about reality TV. It's all staged.
How can it not be? You can't have a baby on TV and it not be real.
Yeah, but
Come on, Tom,
here's a
it's
basic
totally
concept
real.
when you're watching reality TV. You know how hard it is to get the audio and the pictures right when you're making television. Amazing how many times that there's an argument or there's a birth and everything's shot beautifully.
Oh,
Do you
yes,
reckon that
yes.
was just, we just happened to be there with everything set up perfectly for you to stage this event?
There's an
It's
element
all
of production,
jacked up.
but it's
There's
not.
a huge
You
element.
cannot make up a storyline where a couple gets married, tries to have a baby, doesn't have the baby, ends up having a surrogate, has the baby, gets a surrogate again. Like, that's not scripted.
Of course it is.
No,
The whole thing is
it's
structured.
literally not
Right, what's your next
scripted.
step? No, you got to remember they're making 5 or 10 stories at once, and as this story peters out, we'll take this one. The one that comes to fruition is the one that goes to air. It's all a hoax. I'm sorry.
So people are having babies like just because it's scripted into reality TV.
But no, but they've said the producers, we have planning to have a baby. Okay, we'll follow
Okay,
we'll
so it's
follow
real.
your baby.
It's real.
No, they really
It's
have
real.
the baby. The baby's
Yeah.
not fake.
This is my point.
But it's not that they happen to be there. It's that they told us like in 9 months' time I'm
understand
having a
that.
baby. It takes
I
time.
understand.
They got notice
Yeah.
of the baby, and when you.
My point is that their life is real.
Yes, but it's portrayed as a
more real.
sequence of events which you happen to be a fly on the wall. Well, you're not. It was planned and scripted, and people said what they were told to say.
Not quite reality TV,
Not
but
at all.
for those of us who are familiar with the southern part of the South Island, we're mildly surprised to see on Bear Grylls' show how he was climbing up a hillside in central Otago, which many of us recognised, and suddenly, all of a sudden, goes over the top of the hill or somewhere and appears over in South Westland.
Which is pretty hard to do.
Which is pretty hard to do. And those of us who...
That's a perfect example. Now, every time you see you do stuff overseas,
Yes.
you'll be thinking, you'll be doubting. You don't because you
Yeah.
know, and that's because it is faked. It's like he probably stays in a hotel at night. I hate to disappoint you all. The other thing is, imagine this. This is a classic reality thing. There's 2 climbers who were, I watched it the other day. They were climbing this peak. They had a rope round them, and there was 2 cameramen, a lightman, and an audio guy who was standing next to them on the side of the hill. So how precarious could it have been?
Exactly.
Not at all.
No,
it's just faked.
Yeah.
So, but it looks good. Every time you got to think if someone's captured, there's a cameraman there, there's a light guy, there's a producer. And there was a good example actually of a reality exploratory thing with a boat, a guy out in a boat. He went downstairs and there's an entire film crew down there. There's an editor, there's lights and things. In fact, there was hardly room for him on the boat because there was so much production involved, and it was weathering the storm. Well, they're all together.
If it's a very shaky picture and clearly taken through a helmet cam or something, then that is reality.
It's not. It's a GoPro on someone's head to make it look like a fake.
Well, that's true. There is one thing you could look up on YouTube, the most dangerous job in the world, and it will give you vertigo because it is. I think that one cameraman does go up there with this guy on a 2,000-foot tower in the United States of America, and you've got to take your hat off to the guy. I mean, that's the ultimate call on cameraman, boys. You go up there, climbing up a pole 2,000 feet high with just the rungs on the outside.
The one that Tom Cruise
No, this is just...
That was, he sat on top
That
of
was
that.
unbelievable.
Have you seen that?
No.
Not Graham Norton, not pushing the other channels, but he had his photo taken sitting on top of that, I can never pronounce the building, the tallest building in the world in Dubai.
Yeah.
He was sitting perched on the edge.
With no harness.
With
nothing.
no harness, waving at the camera, and then they showed how they did it was the helicopter, and they just sat him
The
down
helicopter's looking down at Tom Cruise.
But he was still doing it.
there. He was absolutely doing
He's
it.
got some moxie, that guy. I mean, he does his own stunts.
I absolutely give him credit for that,
Yeah.
because that was I got really ill just watching.
Yes, I know what you
watching
mean.
that, and I could not have envisaged how he wouldn't have. And he said he wasn't worried about falling.
No.
So but it
Considerable
was seriously
something.
impressive, though.
That
wasn't it?
was.
It was seriously impressive.
But yes, well, no.
To make a complete change of topic, we're going to talk about the Auckland City's Missions Project, working with 100 low-income families. And a Public Voice has found that, to give them a public voice, they've found that all of them want to work, but there's quite a lot of barriers that have to be overcome. Look like an excellent piece of work, Carolyn. They looked at things like debt and how these families overcome debt, justice, just how they dealt with the justice system, housing, and had some examples of some families sort of being cramped into one house. And of course, from our point of view, we say, hey, this would have to be in Auckland because housing is cheaper in other centres. Employment, struggles with employment and trying to get off the benefit and into jobs, health problems, and being able to buy food when the rent was so high. What was your feeling reading through this?
I was really glad that this was a topic because it made me look at it in quite a bit more detail. And so what it is that the Auckland City Mission worked with 100 families for a whole year, and they interviewed them about every fortnight. So they spent a lot of time with them, and the purpose of this study was to focus on what are the barriers that they're facing, basically. And so for what it is, which is a narrative of the barriers for people who are in poverty, it's excellent.
Right.
And when do you ever get the opportunity to really understand what it's like to be living in poverty? So I think the bottom line of it all was that once you're there, it's incredibly difficult.
That's the impression I got.
To get back out.
Yep.
So I think in terms of what that is, it was really good.
And they want to change their own situations, don't they?
Yeah. The thing that it's not definitive, and it's certainly not wide enough though, because it's almost like saying to a person with a heart condition or with heart disease, why have you got heart disease? And you don't know, unless someone else has given you that information. You don't necessarily know how you got into that. You know you're living it, and you're in the pattern of it, and you've got it because of your behaviours and your attitudes and the things you do, but you don't necessarily know how you got it. So I think asking these people, how they sort of got here is not the whole picture. I think it would be worthwhile to have a much broader net and to look at the wider systems before taking any of these outcomes and running with them. So I mean, the answer for me, these people are living, you're right, they're living in Auckland, and the answer for me is move out of Auckland. Because if you're paying $380 a week, or $350 a week for rent, and you're getting $380 on the benefit, you could live in another part of New Zealand and be doing a heck of a lot
cheap,
better.
actually, but a pretty poor house up there for that.
Right.
The thing which actually struck me in reading through it at the end was, it said, many families, this is from a summary from the Herald, many families are involved with multiple social services but constantly have to tell their stories again to staff they don't know. Housing New Zealand and Work and Income both make them ring call centres first. Work and Income abandoned personalised case managers to cut costs in 2010 but revived them last year for 85,000 beneficiaries marked for intensive case management. And they talk about if you're dealing with a person face to face, it does humanise, it's more humanising. And the final sentence says the families request more personalised services and systems that keep their stories on file so they don't have to keep repeating them. So they must feel like a number, it must feel just like an entry in a book somewhere. But something has to be done, doesn't it?
I think Carolyn makes an excellent point, is that if you offer an alternative and you don't want to take it for various reasons, come and live in Southland. I'm not saying Southland or Westland or Greymouth or Wyndham or Taranaki or whatever, because
it is easier
suddenly your position's going to improve dramatically, and you can rebuild your base and then move back to Auckland. How many of them would actually do it? And
Should
I'd
the
say
government
virtually none.
Should they be saying to them, Tom, listen, you guys, we can see you're struggling with your rent. We can see that you're struggling to feed the kids. I mean, there's case in here of mothers saying, well, I just had no food to send with the kids to school, so I actually kept them home from school. Now, this is not good, because I've got a few scraps around home here. But if you said to them, look, what we will do for you is this: we will pack you up, we'll shift you down there, we'll find you a job, we'll set you up in a house, and actually have some government agency to do that. It would address the housing situation in Auckland for a start, with no houses. Should there be some agency bringing together all the services and saying that?
Okay, and if you do that and they say no, I want to stay in Auckland, you say, oh, well, you're on your own.
Yeah.
Because that's the choice.
It's an option, but it's a lot of the issue here, I think, is that people who are in this situation don't want. They might be asking for sort of more from here and more from there, but that'll never make them feel any better. The way that they will get out of this is to start to feel empowered and to start to feel like they are the masters of their own destiny, not that they need more handouts and things. So I think the government, it's always going to sort of be ambulance at the bottom of the cliff type stuff and handout type stuff. But what I think they really need to do is send them in a more empowered direction. Get them working with a life strategist who works out, if you keep going down this track, here's where you're going to end up. Here's where your kids will be. Here's where your grandkids will be. Do you want that, or do you want a more compelling future? And then work it through from there and support them to move out of it. And instead of focusing on all these factors that are restricting them, why not do a study on people who were in poverty, who got out?
It's an example of what to do.
Yep.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Excellent.
and start focusing on here with the success factors in getting out of poverty, as opposed to here are all the reasons why people
helping
are
people
poor.
to manage their situation, giving them real strategies, you mean?
Yeah, and well, it's more about them coming up with the strategies, but by modelling people who have come out of poverty, that's where your answers are. It's not in the, this is why we're here. It's in the, here are the things we do to get out.
Yeah, right.
No, that's actually a good suggestion, because then they've got a sort of a role model or a base model to say that, okay, and it's not saying how do I get from here to being Bill Gates. We're talking about here to being, to this level of comfort that we require as an interim step. And here are a dozen people who have done exactly that. And how have they achieved it? And in different ways, different people would have achieved it by different ways, and then you might be able to pick and choose and say, we can do that, we can do a bit of that, and we can do a bit of that, and build our own little model. Yeah. So that's a great suggestion. Instead of, as you say, you can point to the weaknesses, but where do you go after that?
And that's really what, I like the study, but that's really what it does. At one point when they're talking about justice, they're saying, well, it's actually, it's hard for us, because when you get a criminal record, then it makes it even harder for us. And when somebody goes to prison, well, that affects our whole family.
Which is true.
But it's true for everybody. If people get a criminal record, then that's the same for everyone. So I found that a little bit difficult to sort of digest, because everyone sort of lives under those rules.
Yeah, interesting. Very interesting. Thank you for that. We're going to take a break. Stay with us. When we come back, we've got some more interesting things to talk about, plus topics of interest. We'll be back. Welcome back to Newsroom. Well, just before we go to our topics of interest, we have to talk about Kim.com. We have to talk about KDC. He's in the news. His latest one is that he's saying that he has got a revelation, which is so great. He's booked out the Auckland Town Hall, I believe, for 5 days before the election, and he's going to make his announcement, Carolyn.
He is. He's going to reveal proof that John Key knew about Kim.com well before John Key said he knew about Kim.com, which was the day before
one of the things that's happened in his life. The
mansion was raided. But I love Kim.com. He's like the candy floss of politics. He's sort of nebulous and he's interesting and he's funny and he's exciting and he's just kind of, I love him. I love to listen to him and I love to see what he's up to. And his party is called the Internet Party, and the internet's fun and dynamic and innovative, and party's a party. Like, it's all good with Kim.com.
But he's
so
dodgy.
I like him.
And that's democracy going crazy. Someone with a dodgy record, I think everyone's,
Apparently he had a clean slate though.
And, can come over here, throw your money about, and create a political party and cause some havoc as a consequence. And even Lila Hari, who's heading up his party, has now said if she'd seen his application for residency, didn't she say that she probably wouldn't let him in? So that tells you something we're a little bit uncomfortable.
No, that backs up their case, because they're saying he shouldn't. He was only let in, the SIS changed their mind, and he was only let in so that it would make it easier for the United States to extradite him. So,
as opposed to another country. As opposed to
no.
They couldn't extradite him from Germany.
Right.
They have no extradition policy apparently
Right.
with Germany,
So
he needed to be here for them to get their
what she's
sticky
saying
paws
is
on him.
there was political pressure to bring him in so that he could be then extradited. And what he's saying is that Frodo's behind it all. Is actually the film industry, that our government was basically trying to negotiate a deal with the Hollywood,
that was part of the deal.
with Warner Brothers, and it was all sort of part and parcel of, you give us The Hobbit, we give you Kim.com.
Something slightly bigger than a Hobbit.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you should say that, because Kim.com was being interviewed, and he said, it was in relation to Lila Hari, and he said, and you're going to like this because I know how much you like Star Wars, Kim.com said...
Oh, it's Star Trek.
No.
But anyway, carry on.
You're right.
There's a difference.
He said, Lila Hari is the Obi-Wan Kenobi of our party, and that she will bring along the young learners, the younger... And the interviewer said, so if she's the Obi-Wan Kenobi, what are you? And the obvious answer is, who would you correlate?
Darth Vader.
No, who would you correlate?
Princess Leia.
No.
No, I don't know this one. I'm not going to say it on television.
Everyone was thinking it. It's Jabba the Hutt,
Yeah,
right?
that's right, yeah.
Everyone was thinking it, and Kim.com said, I think I am Yoda. I'm a very large Yoda.
Oh, that's cool. Yeah. Actually, I mean, all jokes aside, he's a highly intelligent man, and I would not want to be messing with him myself. He hasn't made his money through being stupid.
But he may have made it through being illegal.
But what's illegal about Mega Upload?
Wasn't it illegal copyright breaches? Isn't that the whole idea?
The website wasn't doing that. People were uploading files to it, and other people were downloading it. But the website wasn't doing those things.
Yeah, it's a conduit for a criminal act.
It was a conduit. But TradeMe, you could say the same about TradeMe. TradeMe could be a conduit for stolen goods. Is it TradeMe's fault?
But there's a case of, do you know or do you not know? When those movies are uploaded to your site, you know that it cannot have been legal. So, I mean, there was no hiding the fact. And I don't think he's even denying that some of his...
He did actually say that the minute they found out, like if anything was reported, they removed it.
Right.
Yeah. So it's an interesting question. And the legal profession have done extremely well out of it, and will continue to do so.
And obviously there are people, e.g. the FBI, who are quite keen to follow up an investigation involving him. So I just assume that they have some founded suspicions. But that's yet to be proven. I mean, he may be extradited and been found not guilty.
Or some very big corporations pushing them.
But it gets an enormous amount of publicity.
Exactly. That's what it's
Enormous amount of
about.
publicity.
That's what it's all about. I mean,
everything he does gets reported everywhere.
Yes.
That's what I mean. He's like...
Is that good?
He's like Mr. Whippy in politics. He's just... everyone comes running, when they...
And so now, I mean, he set the scene, hasn't he, for 5 days before the election. He set the scene. They'll probably have to sell tickets to the Auckland Town Hall.
Would you?
And then they'll be.
Would you be comfortable, either of you, if they had the balance of power, the Internet Party, with the people they've got involved?
I would be comfortable if Lila Hari had it, because I actually think she's a pretty straightforward, trustworthy person. As you just said, she's saying she wouldn't have let him in.
But she was still taking his money now, even though she thinks there's some concern.
Yeah.
No, she doesn't think there's concern. She was saying that to back up her own argument.
That?
She was saying, I wouldn't have let you in, to back up the argument that he...
So why was he let in? That's the argument, wasn't
that
it?
there was dodgy dealings done in the letting of him in, that it was only to then extradite him. Well, she was basically saying there have been dodgy dealings. I wouldn't have let him in. Like it's sort of counterintuitive, but she was backing him in the saying of that. So
We wait and see.
Yeah,
it won't be
It
the last
goes
you
on.
hear of him.
no, I wouldn't want him coming after me. I would, if I was John Key, I would be nervous.
Yes, that's what I think too.
Well, unless it still sounds pretty lightweight stuff. Is it going to change people's opinion? Is it going to radically change somebody who's extremely popular in an extremely popular party? You're going to say, oh, he did know about it 2 days before he said so, therefore I'm not going to vote for John Key. Do you really think that's going to work?
That is the question. Whether, he probably will come out with a revelation. So the big question is really, is it going to make a difference?
Is the revelation there just to get a bit of last-minute impetus
clearly.
and publicity,
Obviously.
even if it's not got a lot of traction?
I mean, if he's got it already, he says he has it. So the question is, why is he not revealing it now? And so therefore, right at the moment, what he's doing, he's strategising. He's made it quite clear what he's going to do, so he's getting the big build-up. Interesting. Tom, topic of interest.
Oh, topic of interest, Christchurch update.
Yes.
I was pleased to see a report a couple of weeks ago to say that after 3 years after the last earthquake, they are halfway through their stock rebuilding for housing, and then within another 3 years they'll back to the housing stock they had prior. So within 6 years, which is great, because when it the first speculations it'll take 10 years to recover. People think, oh, it'll never happen in 10 years, never happen in my lifetime. Well, they're making such good progress that they have got to that level now. They can make that prediction with some confidence. So I was in Christchurch this week, in fact, on other business, and I thought I'm going to go walk around the CBD and spend sort of the morning just having a look around at exactly what's been done, because every time you go there, there's a lot of activity. Yeah. And it's amazing how much work has been done. There are new buildings open already.
Multi-storey?
Yep, new buildings that are already operating with new businesses. There's lots of holes where places were, but they've been constantly cleaned up. There's construction sites, there is a hive of activity, and every construction site I walked past on a Monday morning had people working. Nobody leaning on spades, nobody it's not just a bulldozer, there was activity on them all. And it was just like watching a beehive going crazy.
Looks like China.
And it was really, it was fantastic to see digging. And you got cones, you got to drive around different areas, and the streets change every 5 minutes. But you just live with that, and people do. But the progress is astounding about what you can do when you really apply yourself and work as a whole community. And it'll look different. And it'll probably look better than the old town, because they'll have all the new structures and the new green areas. And it's amazing how much innovation people have. You go past somebody's obviously blocked a little bit of land and put a container on there and a Thai restaurant, and you just, it's just
amazing.
A shipping container, and there's another one there if you want to go inside, or there's a bench outside. They put a bit of false grass down. The business continues.
I can't help thinking, when that city in another 5 years' time, the rest of us around the country are going to be so jealous.
Yeah, well, and I think within that 10 years, if they've at the rate of progress, I'd be very confident that they've got a city to be proud of in that time.
Particularly if they can save those heritage buildings, which will provide the contrast of the old and the new.
Yeah, but some of the new ones are better.
Yeah.
The new constructions, they're safer, they look great, and it's those little innovative businesses dotted around the place. A little in the middle of the square, there's a little coffee shop where they've just got a caravan, rolled out a bit of astroturf, put a little picket fence around it, and of course all the construction people go there for tea and everything, and it's just people thinking, how do I keep, how do I get back into business? And people have found ways. And I went to cafes at different times of the day. They're pumping. Right. There was queues at cafes, and I'm talking about not just inside the city but outside the city. Business is booming, and it was fabulous. You walk around and you think, wow. In the 6 weeks since I last had a look, so much progress.
Incredible.
Yeah, so well done to you for getting stuck in and making things happen, and not just sitting there and contemplating what's going to happen next. Well, they're making something happen next.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, it's worth a look, obviously.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Carolyn?
Needs must. Yes, my topic is Kids Zone.
You're a bit old for that, aren't you?
Yeah, I am a bit old for that, but I just really want to mention what a great job, the people that are working on it every year do. 11,500 people this year, which
11,500?
Yeah,
It's kids
phenomenal. People through, yeah.
Oh,
yeah, 150 activities. And, what sort of occurs to me is that you can build on this kind of success. So this has been going for 10 years now, and we are clearly kid-friendly, which sort of takes me back to that council report.
That was a big success, wasn't it? Nobody's mentioned that for years.
No, but...
Who actually, so just a background, I don't know anything about who runs it.
Venture Southland run it. It's their event. It's one of they only do a couple of events that they put on themselves, and this is the big one that they do. So ILT Kids Zone, everyone calls it that, and that's a success of marketing in itself as well.
Yeah.
But I just think we could expand that into not just a festival, but something that we have in Invercargill that kids, flock to from all over, the Lower South Island. So yeah, we should be moving in that direction, I think.
Make it so they have to stay overnight, of course, if they did that.
Like a big attraction,
Yeah.
it could be science based
Yeah.
and different activities and nature and all sorts of things that kids flock to, because parents, are always looking for places for their kids.
It's not a
to go and
babysitter's
spend
club,
time.
though, is it?
What, Kids Zone?
Yeah. Is it a dumping?
Well, no, it's not a dumping ground. You have to stay with your child.
Oh, you have to stay with the child. Oh, that's.
Yeah, you can't just sort of leave them.
They still would only be the little ones, though. Can't
You could leave bigger children.
Primary school age
Yeah.
ones can go there, okay?
Yeah. But it's a phenomenal success, and it's certainly something we could do. Probably, if we really applied ourselves, we could do it on a permanent basis. Some kind of adaptation of it.
Yeah.
To attract people down.
The kids look forward to it.
Definitely.
They love it.
Yeah, it's the right time of year too.
Yeah, great stuff.
What's your topic, Bill? Nothing.
My topic, actually, Tom,
In 10 seconds.
in 10 seconds is thank you very much for watching this and being with us this week. We always appreciate it, and we'll be back in a fortnight's time. We'll see you later.